Gandalf the Fool, another question. It's a bit out of the blue, this one. Finally, a question. What's your take on turn 3 at the Nürburgring? 1, 2... What is 3? Is that the right-hander after the long left? I was watching some onboard laps from the past and noticed how much later Jensen turns in compared to Kimi. Well, yeah, I mean, Jensen was always a long corner driver, long as Carlos Sainz. But with Sergio Perez's level of throttle application, linear throttle application, really, really good loading of the left rear, the loaded rear. That was Jensen's great hallmark, in my opinion. But long corners, longer than Lando's. And I'm impressed that you saw that. I mean, I don't remember that exact comparison, but Kimi, that would have been a corner where Kimi would have been shortening the corner because it's quite a long straight after that downhill straight into the left-hander. And I thought that was a great Kimi corner. So yeah, well noticed and no surprise at all. Jensen was that. And that next left-hander, by the way, that downhill left-hander was the first time I remember watching Michael using the paddle shift and left foot braking in a way that I'd never seen anybody doing it before, and changing gear mid-corner and settling the car, using the left foot brake just to get the car rotated beautifully. And I remember watching a practice session there and thinking, wow, this is the new era. This is the new era, because we've got paddle shifts combined with left foot braking. Rubens, of course, was still running right foot braking right up to the end of his Ferrari career. I think even at Williams, actually, I may be wrong. But and Braun, I think he definitely had right foot braking. But Michael, that was the first time I'd seen left foot braking combined with paddle, and it was such a breakthrough moment on that left hand at the Nürburgring. New Nürburgring we're talking about, because I don't think we ever called the corners at the old circuit, the Nordschleife, by a turn number, did we? It was always Schwagenbach and Flugplatz and Pflanzgarten. And yeah. I always remember, I'm sure no one will laugh at this, but okay, I'll start with Piers Thin, who we all know now is doing a brilliant job running the McLaren factory, basically, or the company as well. I think with the race team, he effectively half runs the race team in that he's the factory guy that makes it all happen, and he runs the factory in the company. Great guy. He's the son of Sheridan Thin, with whom I spent many wonderful years at Williams, my colleague at Williams. And Sheridan was one of the first great friends of Frank Williams back in the mid 60s. And Sheridan used to race a Mini Cooper, so what more can you say? How good is that? Anyway, Sheridan and I were very good friends with Anthony Marsh, who used to be the commentator at all the Grand Prix, the sort of Bob Constanduros of Formula One in those days, and he was the race commentator. And it's Anthony Marsh's voice you hear, for example, in throughout Grand Prix, the movie, and they're all dubs that Anthony Marsh did, but John Frankenheimer wanted the noise, the voice of the man who actually did the PA, and that was Anthony Marsh. And he was always known as Bunter, for a reason, as in Billy Bunter, for reasons that we won't go into too deeply, but I've got to say, he was an incredibly good man, Anthony Marsh. Did a massive amount of work for the Springfield Boys Club, for example. Very, very pushy in getting people to go along there every winter and give their time and donations, and just a good man, and a bit opinionated and a bit sort of, Bunter summed him up quite well. And anyway, I was with Sheridan on race morning at Nürburgring, and we wanted to get hold of Anthony Marsh and tell him something. It was something to do with the team, Williams or whatever. So there was a policeman standing there in the pit lane. So Sheridan went up, sort of half jokingly, and said, "Where is the Bunter house?" Meaning, where is the commentary box where Bunter, the commentator, would be commentating? And of course, the policeman thought he was talking about the post office, which I think is Bunterhaus in German, and directed us to the post office. Great story, Peter. Anyway, there you go. They're the stupid things that used to happen in those days. Anthony Marsh missed. I don't know how we got onto that one, but thank you, Gandalf. Nippy Moto. The only guy on the grid that can take it to max consistently is Lewis. Watching his onboards, I think Lewis is still driving as good as he was. The only issue is his qualifying race pace is rapid. Yeah, well, I hope some of you were watching the Saturday video I did from Austria when I pinpointed that great section of road, turns 7 and 8, the left-hander becoming the right-hander, that change of direction. after that long left-hander in the midfield. And I got down to the microsectors there. And number 2 behind Max was Lewis Hamilton there. Really, really good. Just showing he still has all that finesse and touch and feel. He was something like 5 kilometres quicker than George right there. But guess what? George was quicker through the last 2 corners. George was quicker through turn 1. And George was quicker through turn 4, I think. So, yeah, what does that mean? It means when it's very finessey and it's very tiptoey, Lewis is still absolutely right up there. It also means that when it's just like, you know, a right-hander and I'm going to get this corner almost perfect, I'm going to be right on the edge, it's always going to be difficult to beat George Russell because it doesn't require, I mean, finesse. It does require finesse, but it requires commitment and judgment more than it requires finesse, those last 2 corners, as does turn 1, as does turn 4. And so, and Lewis, I think Lewis's great thing now is his finesse. He's not going to commit at the level George Russell commits on a consistent basis anymore, I don't think. And that's partly the Mercedes, you know, hangover that we're in now, where he's in this weird thing of leaving the team and he's moving on to better pastures. Partly he never wanted George in the car anyway. He wanted to keep Valtteri as his teammate. Partly a little bit of the cloud still from the World Championship. He thinks he should have won in Abu Dhabi in 21. And a lot of the world does as well, including me. And partly being a 7 times world champion has been there, done that, and knows when it's worth taking a risk and knows when it's worth being Lewis and that lovely finesse. And when, if it comes down to 0.001 of total commitment, he's going to give it to George. I think it's that. But I thought it was really impressive, and I was actually quite surprised when I got all those numbers and all that data. I wasn't surprised. I was actually very pleased to see how good Lewis was there. And that's a really good bit of road there. Really good bit of road. I've got to hand it to Austria that finally that circuit's come up with something that really works. That section of road. Well, it works with these cars on these tyres. That's why I've never really thought about it before. Okay, first of the super chats. Octay Yilmaz. Try 110. Thank you very much. I think Max lacks Senna's hard speeches. He's a very native speaker. He silenced after Silverstone 21. Also that stupid Red Bull mistake, Monza 21, USA 22, and this. But he is a guy to watch. Yeah, he doesn't talk that much, does he? And I think that's a good thing. It's the counterpoint to what I was just saying about Andrea Stella winding up the McLaren world by saying, this is the Max Verstappen that we all knew from 2021, and now look what he's doing. All that stuff. And the counterpoint to that is Max saying very little, and just go, it's a motor race, been there, it's had that, move on. I'm very annoyed I didn't win that race. At least I finished 5th, and that's it. And he was probably karting or something on the Monday afterwards, having fun with his mates. And that's what makes him a very, very good racing driver. He's very simple. He's got his sim games, he's got his Formula One, and he's karting. And that's probably about it. And I love that. Total and utter commitment. Great stuff. Brilliant. And there you go. That's really messed up the exposure. So yeah, I mean, very different. Whereas Ayrton would often talk a lot. I mean, I used to talk to Ayrton for, well, not hours, but I mean, when he was in Formula Ford, I remember, on any given race day at Silverstone, he was in Formula Ford or Ford 2000. You'd find Ayrton after the race and ask him a question about what gear he took in COPS or whatever, and you'd have him for half an hour. Never stop talking. Difficult to get Max to talk for half an hour. Well, I did a thing with him at Sky once, and he spoke a lot until the director kept saying, enough. Another super chat. This is from Harley Rule. What can they do to stop people faking being pushed off the track? Alonso clearly did it on the weekend. I'm glad you said that and not I. I'm always a bit scared of Fernando Alonso. And Hamilton did it heaps in 21. Others do it too. The racecraft seems to be lacking a lot with some drivers. Well, absolutely. I think I should be paying you for that comment. It's brilliant. Thank you very much. You're right. Oh, he had me off. He pushed me off. Pierre Gasly was pretty good at that one too, isn't he? With dropping old Ocon into it. Yeah, they do it all the time. It's all histrionics. And it's all because of radio, and it's all because of, I don't know what it is. blame Netflix, really, I suppose. Looks good on camera, I guess. But you're right. What was Alonso doing worrying about that? I mean, his biggest worry was that he was getting blown away into nowhere. He was nowhere. And he should have been on the radio saying, see what happens when you give me a rubbish car? I get into a battle with this guy who's just run into me. It wasn't blaming him. I mean, who cares? The position they were in, it was nowhere. But speaking of Aston Martin, I noticed today, the news just in, that Andy Cowell's going to move in there he's been invited to take over, which is good, from Martin Whitmarsh and running that team. So I suspect, and bearing in mind, obviously, the 26 regs with the new power unit and how good Andy was in his days at Mercedes and before that, Ilmore and Cosworth, that's a very good move for Aston Martin, I think, and quite bad news for everybody else. I was only asking somebody the other day, where was it? Barcelona, I think. I was talking to an engineer saying, what's Andy Cowell doing these days? I'm surprised nobody's hired him. But exactly, somebody was listening, eavesdropping, and now Aston Martin have hired him. So that's a very, very good thing for Aston Martin, I think. Very good. So all the best to Andy Cowell. On another subject altogether, maybe it'll come up or not, but I'll mention it anyway. I noticed Williams are going to have a new livery or different livery on the car with the Union flag, and it's a tribute to the 1,003 employees. So there it is. It's in black and white now. 1,003 people, and they still couldn't get a spare car in the freight for the Australian Grand Prix, a spare chassis. Unbelievable, isn't it? And that's the impression you get. You go to Williams and you think, wow, this is so impressive. And they're hopeless. Well, not hopeless. They have some good qualifying sessions and occasionally get some points. But they're not where they should be, given the fact that they have 1,003 employees. More than that, because they've just announced sort of, 5 or 6 new engineers joining the team. So that's, what's at least 1,008 now, probably 1,010. And they still, makes me laugh actually when, Audi just announced the appointment of Audi or Sauber, one of the two, them both, announced a performance engineer. How can you have a performance engineer when you don't have any performance anyway? I just don't get it. All these titles and names and people, and the number of employees, 1,003. What would Frank Williams think about that? We were 130 when we built the 14B? Probably the most technically advanced Formula One car of all time. 130 people. Williams are now 1,003 people, and they're struggling to beat Haas Ferrari. Struggling. Well, they're not beating them. Sarash Soman, hi Peter. Did you have a chance to look at the Soapbox video where Max ended up fastest by 1 second to the next best guy? Thank you very much for asking that question. It took me a while because guess what? It's not on the Red Bull Media Hub. Annoyingly, they've only got still pictures, and to watch it you got to go onto YouTube. Nothing wrong with YouTube, except that I can't then put it on my YouTube channel because it belongs to somebody else, and it's a big rigmarole of getting permission, all that stuff. So, but yes, absolutely, and you can see Max there letting the thing run freely, getting into a straight line as much as possible, and just being absolutely square with the soapbox. It's brilliant stuff, and thank you so much for pointing that out. And it's just a reminder that Rob Wilson is absolutely correct when he says that if there's a difference in driving between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen, it will definitely show up in a standard road car. Absolutely. In fact, it'll be magnified by a standard road car. And that is an absolute fact that I would bet 90% of all the key people in all the Formula One teams would not accept. They would all think that the only way a driver could improve his own physical driving would be in a racing car, not a road car. And they're wrong. They're completely wrong. And Rob's proved that. And the Red Bull Soapbox has proved that. So anybody who thinks it's expensive, learning the craft needs to think again. It's not as... You could find any... I would think, take out Max maybe, take out some of the top 3, let's say. Any other Grand Prix driver, if they did a month of days with Rob Wilson, let's say, 12 days of Rob Wilson, I would be absolutely astonished if they didn't find a 1/10 of a second in their driving over one lap. Astonished. And think about how much money a team spends in order to find 1/10 of an aerodynamic advantage from CFD in the wind tunnel, given the restraints also of testing anyway, which makes it even more ludicrous that they don't spend the money that it would take just to go out and do a day with Rob, which isn't a lot. It's Rob's daily fee, which, knowing Rob, is not very much. Then it's the rental of a car, and it's not even that. I think Rob probably gets cars these days from manufacturer, I think from Ford. It's tires, set of tires, it's the track hire, and it's usually, you know, Bedford on a Wednesday, so it's not going to break the bank. And that's it. You know, it's nothing compared with a wind tunnel test. It's nothing compared with CFD. So why don't they do it? Oh, they don't do it. I can tell you now why. Because they're all infallible and they're all perfect. In the same way that it can't be Lando Norris's fault, it's got to be Max Verstappen's fault. If you are Andrea Stella, it cannot be anything to do with Lando. Because we've all known about Max ever since 21, and now he's showing his true colours. I mean, what is that all about? I like Andrea a lot. It's a really good bloke. But I'm astonished that he said that, to be honest. How, as a viewer, can we make out if the braking is smooth and the car is stable under transition? From the onboards, all I can see is the steering inputs. Can't get a feel for throttle and brake application. Well, you're absolutely right. You can't. And it's been one of my bête noire over the years that we don't have cameras in the footwell area of Grand Prix cars, because watching the footwork is much more important than watching the handwork. A Grand Prix car is driven by the feet, not by the hands, primarily. And without the footwork, you don't have the handwork. That's why Fernando Alonso is so good. Fernando Alonso's footwork, once he's got the car, once he's got through that pretty horrendous initial handwork of boom, loading the car up, boom, loading the car up, the reason he gets away with that every lap, or most laps, apart from when he nearly went, I nearly crashed in qualifying, was it? Qualifying or FP3 or something, or sprint qualifying, I can't remember. Anyway, in Austria. Actually interesting, turn 7 and 8 transition, is because his footwork is so sublime. He's absolutely wonderful. And I can say that because I have seen his footwork. I was lucky to do a few laps with him once in a Renault Megane Turbo around Ricard. And I said, I want to see your footwork. I'm going to watch your feet, Fernando. And he thought it was really funny. And at the end of it, he said, so how was it? How was it? He was keen to know what, you know, how it all went. And sure enough, it was absolutely wonderful. It was just, feet were just dancing over the pedals. Just incredible feel. While he was talking, you know, it was just all happening purely naturally. And that's what we don't get. And we don't get it because in order to have decent footage, it needs to have a decent angle. You need to have decent lighting, and to have decent lighting, they can get the camera small enough, but it's very difficult to get the lighting right in the football area. And I have said over the years, as much as I've said get rid of DRS and various other things, I've said that I would love when the new regulations are drawn up, at any given moment when they're drawing up regulations, new regulations, that they build it in that they have to have enough space in the football area for the lighting they need to have football cameras. And they never do it. So I'm assuming they haven't done it for 27 either, 26. So that's not going to happen. But you're right. If we could see that and it was all synced up, we would see a lot more. I did try to do a video once of Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes infield. I think it's on my channel, at Mercedes World at Brooklands. I was doing a few laps with him there in some sort of Mercedes, AMG thing, and we had a camera on his feet and we had a camera on his hands, and we did try to marry them up. And I actually got Rob Wilson to voice it over, and he found a moment when Valtteri was really, really good in terms of just letting the car settle and what he was doing with the footwork and how he was coming out of the brake pedal pressure just to settle the car, which is a beautiful thing to see. And you don't see that, of course, in the onboards we have. So in answer to your question, how can a viewer look at braking? All you can do is look at the external shot, the offboard, as somebody called them the other day. And you can see quite a lot, but it's got to be from angles shot with a camera that is not moving with the car, not panning with the car. You can, and I'm looking forward to Silverstone. Hopefully they've got that camera on the entrance to Copse, which is, I don't know what turn it is now, the old turn 1, the right-hander, very fast right-hander. And the camera, often that camera just tends to stay and they go, wow, 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 like that. And when they do that, you'll see braking. And I did a video a couple of years ago. There was some footage put out, rights-free footage put out by Red Bull when Albon was at Red Bull. And I did a video called Why Alex Albon is Better Than People Think He Is, or something like that. And it's because from that angle, they had a camera there, and you could see there his transition. His braking was really good. There was no movement of the car, and you could just tell that he'd got the braking beautifully in cadence with the road and the grip of the tyres. There was nothing overloading the car, nothing sharp about his brake application. And then you could see a very seamless transition into the corner. A little bit wide, he's going on a little bit too long and making the corner a bit too long compared with Max. But in terms of the transition, it was beautiful. It's what Jarno Trulli used to be so good at, and Jean Alesi, that transition. Jacques Lafitte too. Three drivers with phenomenal transition. Better, for example, than Jenson Button's. Jensen's feel, I think, was from apex to exit. He just had great feel from apex to exit, and great traction, feel for traction. So yeah, there we go. I was just thinking about Jenson. I think the other thing about Jenson is that it always struck me that he had really good lack of overlap between throttle and left foot braking. He wasn't a great one for doing what I just described Michael doing and using the left foot brake to set up the car a little bit, because Michael could do it without slowing down the car. He was just setting up the car. Whereas I think Jenson, quite correctly, was always wary of slowing down the car by braking against throttle. And as a result, he became one of the great drivers in terms of lack of overlap. And there was virtually nothing between throttle and brake with Jenson, but he didn't have a lot of overlap. And that's an art and a skill in itself. He compared with a lot of other drivers. I mean, Taku Sato is a good example of a driver that had a lot of brake against throttle, whereas Jenson very rarely did that. Had a great feel for the pedals. Okay, here's another super chat. Thank you very much, Aaron Smith. Do you feel George is being underrated by fans? Not by me. I don't know about the fans. I've always thought he was super quick. I mean, that's why, if you look at my channel, I've got lots of interviews with George when he was in GP3 and F2, and always been a massive fan. I've done a few live events with him as well. Incredibly fast racing driver. Anybody who didn't think that, even from his GP3 days, let alone today, doesn't know what they're looking at. And that's obviously the reason that Lewis never wanted him in that car instead of Valtteri. I understand it from Lewis's standpoint, and I kind of always thought it was a bit strange that Mercedes took the decision they did, because George is that quick. And do you really want to unsettle Lewis Hamilton that much by having a driver that quick in the other car, in a way that you would never put somebody that quick alongside Max Verstappen, for example? But in terms of your question, I don't know. I can't imagine by the fans. I imagine he's going to go to Silverstone as the new hero of the fans, is he not? I imagine he and Lando pretty evenly split between the two, I would guess. Hi Peter, do you think McLaren will do what Mercedes did in 21 and turn the British media into a weapon against Max? I think they will, but I don't think they're doing it intentionally. And I think, as I just said, I think Andrea Stella should have thought a little bit more before he had made the comments public that he's just made, because I don't think it helps Lando. I think it puts Lando in a position, not a position, it puts him in a world of thinking that Lando, is perfect and did everything correctly, and Max did not. And therefore, because Max didn't get any sort of penalty for the other moves, that it's unfair. And I think that's a bad way to be nursing your driver along in a long season. I don't agree with that. Leon Ong. Hi Peter, if car and driver were to be placed as percentage, how much would a driver's input be? Well, it's always been a good question, Leon, always. And this was put to Enzo Ferrari, who's probably as good as anyone in the planet Earth to have answered it. And he said, when a car crosses the line to win a Grand Prix, he would apportion it 60% car, 40% driver. However, of course, there's a lot more to it than that, because the great drivers can make an average car a lot better in a much shorter time than the average drivers, because they're looking to improve different things. They know what they can do They know what shortcomings they can overcome with their driving, and they know what shortcomings the engineers need to work on. And furthermore, they're not going to choose a shortcoming that is impracticable. So it's all going to be done in a logical way. So that's why Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher, to name but three, when they were kind of in a position to be almost running their own teams, had great results. And it was because they knew exactly what was doable and what wasn't, what they could bring to the table and what the engineers could bring to the table. Whereas a lot of lesser drivers want most of the problems to be solved by the engineers on the basis that they are the racing driver and they're very fast, and if they're not quick, it must be the car. And so that's why I say a great driver can make an average car a lot better. So it isn't as simple as 60-40, but on the final lap of the race, when the job is about to be done and the checkered flag is waved, I would say it's that. It's a mechanical sport. Every team has to design and build its own car, even to enter the World Championship. Every team employs 1,000 people plus to do that, and some of them a lot more because they build their own engines as well. And because of that, it's a mechanical sport, and it's never going to be as competitive in terms of overtakes as a sport where everybody's basically in the same car, which is most other forms of motorsport, but not rallying impressively. Good win for Toyota along the way in Poland. Felt very bad for Sébastien Ogier though. He had this road accident during the recce beforehand, just a few days before the rally. And it looks like it was some sort of head-on with a Ford Mondeo estate. And they were both going quite slowly. Well, certainly Ogier was going well within the, I think it's 80 kilometers an hour on the recces, something like that on that bit of road anyway. He was well under it. And he got hit by this Mondeo, and it was enough for him to be with a neck brace taken to hospital, and he's okay, but he couldn't do the rally. But his replacement went in, Rovanperä went in and won the race, won the rally. Brilliant. Great win for Toyota. Felt sorry for Thierry Neuville because it's a very odd thing. He's leading the championship, and as a result of which, he is the first on the road. And on the Friday, at least, the road being first on the road was a massive disadvantage. It's probably worth about it was probably an excess time of at least 20-30 seconds because the road was so slippery, and after about the second or third car there was a lot more grip, but because he was leading the championship he had this massive penalty and he finished fourth overall. Seems an odd wrinkle in the whole WRC regulations. I suppose they've done it just to keep things close, and it's a bit like DRS, isn't it? A bit stupid. So that was that, but it reminded me actually of that Ogier thing, reminded me of the London-Sydney Marathon, in which I was actually an official, would you believe, right at the end. I was just a kid at school, but I got a job through the Australian Automobile Racing Club, who were organising the finish of the rally at Warwick Farm. I got a job delivering the post, the mail, to all the teams. And all this mail had logged up in the office. A lot of people, all the drivers and navigators, a lot of the team people, there were no mobile phones. Everything was obviously very different in those days. And there were a lot of letters. Each team probably had about 5 or 6 letters addressed to the drivers. Not fan mail, but just letters from family or friends or whatever. And my job was to distribute all this mail. It was a brilliant thing. All the cars were all lined up on the Hume Straight there, and I was going down from car to car. Oh, where's Roger Clark? Oh, Roger, here's some mail for you. Things like this. Anyway, reminded me of those terrible last hours before the finish of that London-Sydney Marathon when Lucien Bianchi, I've got to get this right, I think he's the grand uncle of Jules Bianchi. I think he was the grand uncle. Anyway, the Bianchi family, all great race drivers. There was Mauro and Lucien, who were brothers, very, very quick, both of them. And then, of course, Jules Bianchi. Amazing, that family. But Lucien was good and finished 4th, I think, in the Spanish Grand Prix 68, that'd be right. Cooper BRM, but not slow in a number of cars. Very good in sports cars, pretty good in Formula One, quick driver. Anyway, he had this rally sewn up, the London-Sydney. He was in a Citroën, and he'd driven amazingly well, considering rallying he'd done a lot of it. He'd done the sort of tour of Europe and all that stuff, but he wasn't a professional rally driver like a lot of the guys out there he was beating. And on the last, it wasn't even the last stage, it was the last section from the last stage to Warwick Farm racetrack near Liverpool. He was asleep in the co-driver seat, and the co-driver was driving, no problem at all, and a truck hit them on the wrong side of the road, hit them head on, and they both survived, but Lucien was very, very badly injured. Took him a long time to recover. And the victory went to Andrew Cowan famously in the Hillman Hunter. But I was so looking forward to seeing Lucien Bianchi, Formula One driver, and I couldn't believe it when he didn't turn up. And he had this ridiculous accident, similar to the accident of Sébastien Ogier in the build-up to Portugal. Anyway, there's a lot of Formula One stuff for you. Notty, hi Peter, do you think Williams with the investment behind them really will be an attractive option for Carlos? Secondly, could Bottas accept a one-year deal at Merck to let Kimi go to Williams first? Wow. Well, the first one, this big investment at Williams. It's so odd at Williams. They're always, half the time they're saying we don't have enough money and resources, so we couldn't afford to take a spare chassis to Australia. On the other hand, they suddenly start hiring people and doing new liveries on the car, which aren't cheap. And so I have no idea. I said at the time, when they didn't have that spare chassis in Australia, for a bank, whatever they are, equity bank, I don't know what sort of bank they are, they don't seem to be spending a lot of money. But now they seem to be spending a lot of money. If I was Carlos, I'd be thinking they're not spending any more money now, obviously, than they were spending before, because why wouldn't they have had the money to spend before? They obviously did. So what's going to change? And there's obviously some issue there with not getting things really right. And so I'm going to take the softest option and go to Audi. That's what I would do if I was Carlos Sainz, I think. Unless Alpine with Flavio come up with something that's half attractive. Maybe. I doubt that, though. I don't think I would. I think I'd still go to Audi on the basis that you can grow with that Sauber team. As pitiful as it is at the moment, you can organically grow with them and try and change a few things and get a few good results, and then simultaneously try to kick the whole Audi thing into shape, as I said before. And that's the way for him to go if he doesn't get anything else. But he might take the Williams thing. He might, bank. He's got Albon in the other car. He's got, I don't know. He's just got, it looks like a difficult team to me. For me, that's all I can say. Not the Williams that I used to know, that's for sure. Second point, could Bottas accept a one-year deal at Merck to let Kimi go to Williams? So what you're saying is Mercedes are desperate to have Kimi in Formula One, but they're not sure that he's the right guy to be alongside George next year. But why wouldn't they be sure? If they think he's the next Ayrton, which presumably they do, otherwise they wouldn't be banging on like a pork chop, as we say in Australia, then why wouldn't they put him in the car prior to the big drama of 26, when it's the new car and you've got to get used to all the new technology and get the best from it? Give him a good year in the back end of this formula, rattling around next to George. Why wouldn't that be a good time to put him in the car? I would, if he's that good. Ayrton went straight from Formula 3 to Tolman. And you'd imagine that the Mercedes next year is going to be a better car than the Tolman Hart was in 1984. So why wouldn't they just put him in the car? What would he do in a Haas or a Williams that he couldn't do in a Mercedes? That's my response to that. So why would they do that? They either believe in him or they don't, I think. I'd love to see Valtteri back there. I would. I'm a bit of a Valtteri fan. I think he'd be a good bloke for Audi, actually, if they gave him a bit more responsibility and a bit more confidence for the future. I think he'd do quite a good job. Not necessarily driving for Audi, but taking that team to the level at which they should be operating. I think he's got a good brain and he knows what he's doing. A little bit like another Finn, Jari-Matti Latvala, who's doing a very good job now as team principal of Toyota. I can see Valtteri Bottas doing a very good job if he was given the opportunity, working alongside, I guess, Andreas Seidl, with Sauber taking Audi to the next generation. So Latvala, Bottas, what do they have in common? I think they have that ability. Hi Peter, do you think Max's pit wall informed him that Lando was under investigation for track limits? It was obvious Lando was going to have a 5-second penalty. I don't think Max could have... Oh, it's another one here, just another part to this question. Defended like that if he knew. I also think that the RB20 isn't the best car now, considering what Checo's doing. Max is just extracting a lot from the car. Maybe they should have evolved the RB19 instead. Well, several parts to those questions. The first is that I think the timing was very, very close to the actual timing of the accident. In other words, it appeared on screen, and we now know, about 35 seconds, I think, after the actual impact, in which they were effectively then out of the race, even though Max kept going, as we know. Which means that in terms of, that's letting the public know. So in theory, the teams or the FIA had made the decision maybe a minute before that. Say the FIA, the stewards. So the question is, how quickly did that information get to Red Bull? How quickly did it get to McLaren? And my guess is that they probably did know about it almost at the point when the shunt was taking place, maybe a little bit before. But I think there's this thing in Formula One as well of not talking to the driver when he's in the corners or under pressure, and they tend to do it on the straights. So to give Red Bull as much benefit as we possibly can, obviously for a missed opportunity here, you could say that they were waiting for the right moment to tell Max, and that's why they were a bit late. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if you watch the World Rally Championship, you hear the co-drivers talking incessantly to the drivers. It's all, oh, you left, you can't actually hear a word they're saying, or I can't understand a word they're saying. They're on the radio link, and no matter what the guy's doing, whether he's upside down or sideways in midair, they're just going, usually in another language. And it seems that the drivers in World Rally Championship don't mind at all having this incessant chatter in their ears. And yet in Formula One, they're all a bit precious about that. And fair enough, you know, I can remember the first time we ran radios on Nigel's car at Williams. We were at Imola testing, and I think David Brown said something, radio check or something, and Nigel was in the middle of Tamburello and got back on the radio and said, "Don't ever talk to me in the middle of a quick corner again." Fair enough, that's where it all started probably. But so I'm giving Red Bull the benefit of the doubt. But I think the real problem there, as I said in the chat I had with Cameron yesterday, and as I said many times actually since the Alex Peroni shunt at Monza a few years ago in GP3, when he was nearly killed because they had those ridiculous sausage curbs on the outside of the parabolic where it just launched his car and he came down on top of the guardrail basically on the outside. And I did a big thing then about, you know, we should have electronic sensors everywhere, and we shouldn't be just relying on the human eye and the infallibility of curbs when they're covered with dust and all sorts of stuff, and may even be breaking up a bit. And I said then we should have photo cells under sensors, and we should make it part of the TV show that as the car goes over the sensor, it's either green, or let's not have green because there'll be too many of them in theory, but it goes red if he's over the thing, and everybody can see it in real time, including the teams on the pit wall. And I said that, 4 years ago now? And nothing's happened as far as I can see. I don't even know how electronic it is now in terms of the sensors. I don't think there are that many. Maybe a couple of corners, but I don't think a lot. And we're only talking 1 or 2 key corners per lap, per circuit, and not all the circuits anyway. So I don't know why they haven't done that. There's a lot of things I suggest that they don't do, so no surprise there, I suppose. This is one of Windsor's suggestions. We better not do that. We'll go the other way and never have them. But look at the trouble it's caused. Absolutely. I mean, as I said, I was doing that video after the race, and literally the thing came up on my iPhone as I was talking, about this penalty for Lando, and I thought, wow, what a missed opportunity there for Red Bull. Having said all of that, let's just think about this, because if they'd said to Max, as their sort of top speed on that straight approaching turn 3, if they'd said to Max, 5-second penalty for Lando, what would he have done at that point? Would he have just immediately backed off and waved Lando past? Or would he have done what he did, actually, and just go into the corner, sort of brake without locking anything up and just keeping the car nice and stable and just staying in the middle of the road? And would he have done anything different? He might have let him past on the next straight. And equally, from Lando's point of view, if he knew he had the penalty, I suppose he would be, he'd be doing his dive bombing, wouldn't he? Trying to get past on every corner and trying to get the 5-second lead when he got in front. So, I don't know. To me, it's a missed opportunity. They haven't made track limit sensors part of the TV show in the way that a lot of other telemetry is these days, and I just don't get that. I think it should be, and I think that's the reason we're having this discussion now. Philip Roos says, Musso, Collins or Hawthorne? Brilliant. Thank you very much, Philip. Now, somebody's going to say, oh, he's obviously a mate of yours, Windsor, to put in a question like that. I have to say, I'm ashamed to say I don't know Philip Roos, but I'm very impressed with what he's doing there to break up the monotony of all this other stuff. And it reminds me of, and I've been meaning to say this for quite a while, it reminds me of after the US Open, Bryson DeChambeau, there was an interview with Bryson, and he was talking about how at various stages of his career, in his golf bag, he's named his clubs after various great golfers or golfers that he admired from the past. So the 5-iron would be a Bobby Jones, or the 6-iron would be a Tiger Woods, or the 1-wood would be a Jack Nicklaus. And it was interesting. I would say 50% of the names that he had given his clubs were from golfers who had played prior to 1960. And I just had the thought, I wonder how many of today's Formula One stars, if they were asked to name 10 drivers prior to 1960 that they admired, how many would be able to come up with even one name, let alone 2 or 3? They'd probably say Fangio, I guess, and they might say Nuvolari at a push, but I think most of them would be struggling. The point I'm trying to make is that there's not enough respect for the past in Formula One, mainly because Bernie has just brushed it under the table for the last 30 years, and that's permeated right through the sport, right through to the next younger generation coming into Formula One. And it's just considered to be quite cool not to know anything about the past and just say glibly, oh, well, it's before my time, which is what a lot of them say, of course. And that's no excuse at all, because without history and without those drivers, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so thank you very much for this question, Musso, Collins or Hawthorne. From those three, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, 58 was a pivotal year for those three. Well, it was a calamitous year for 2 of them, because Luigi Musso lost his life in the 58 French Grand Prix, Peter Collins the 58 German Grand Prix, and Mike Hawthorne went on to win the 58 Drivers' Championship, and then lose his life a few months later in a road accident in January 59. Collins, Hawthorne, very close friends, in a way that you wouldn't say Max and Lando are good friends. They were, they've got a lot in common, and they have a few laughs prior to Austria 2024. But Peter Collins and Mike Hawthorne were really close, and they were real friends to one another and supported one another. So you can imagine the devastation for Mike Hawthorne when Peter was killed. Just after winning the British Grand Prix, I mean, just think about it. He won the British Grand Prix, this blonde-haired hero of a British racing driver winning the British Grand Prix in a red Ferrari, and then 2 weeks later he loses his life in the German Grand Prix. It's unthinkable today. I mean, I don't even want to think about it, but that's what happened. And Mike Hawthorne had to live through that and went on to win the championship. And Luigi Musso was a classic Italian Ferrari driver who had a few gambling debts and a few other idiosyncrasies, and was under a lot of pressure going into the 58 French Grand Prix to retain his place in the Ferrari factory team. And famously, Enzo said, right, this is a big race for us in terms of prize money. It was one of the biggest races of the season. Get out there and let's do it. And I think he just tried to go through that first right-hander flat and ran wide onto the grass, as a lot of Formula One drivers do today, not necessarily onto the grass, but onto the runoff area. But in the case of Rins in 58, it tipped the car over, he was thrown out and killed. I've been a big Peter Collins fan for a long time, and so I'd have to give the nod to Peter Collins there. I think he's underrated, massively underrated, when people talk about great drivers from the past and some of the great drivers of all time. I always think Peter Collins, considering how difficult it was just to get into Formula One and do well in an incredibly dangerous era, I think Peter Collins was a great combination of enthusiasm, natural talent, a gentleman, humility, and good manners. And in many ways is my personification of how a racing driver should be. And so, yeah, I mean, nothing against Mike Hawthorne either. I think Hawthorne was probably underrated as well. Looks to me, I never saw him drive, but it looks to me like he was a little bit more oversteery than Peter Collins, and loved to just sort of Keke Rosberg style, I think. Loved to just drive on the left rear, bit of Jochen Rindt in there. So Hawthorne should not be on. I know Patrick Hidd always rated Mike Hawthorne very highly. Patrick's sort of driver, I think.